initial budget kickoff presentation. But the feedback I heard was that there were a lot of questions about Vision Zero and how it relates to the work that you do. And it was a good reminder that, those of us who've been working closely on this have just done nothing but eat, sleep, drink Vision Zero for the last year. But that hasn't been everybody. And so it's probably high time to start sharing information about what we've been talking about, what it is, and how it relates to your everyday work. And so that's the purpose of this kickoff conversation. And I'm going to run through a short presentation, but happy to take questions, comments, observations. I want this to be the beginning of a conversation that we have about how this touches everything we do. And no matter what you do in this department in the city, your work is connected to this. And so I'm going to walk through this quickly, and then we'll bring a couple folks up at the end and do questions and comments as well. So just to start, as a reminder, the policy framework for the work that we do, so our guiding light, our North Star, the places that we should be looking to sort of check in on the major policy in the city are sort of three major sort of legs of the stool. One is our strategic plan, which is Great Streets for Los Angeles. And here's the part where I remind you to do the employee survey if you haven't done it already, because it's really, really important to putting meat on the bones of a lot of what is in the strategic plan. I kept it under 20 questions. It shouldn't take you very long. If you have problems with it, let me know or let Jasmine know. I'll send out a reminder before we close the survey, but I'm really, really hoping to beat the 297 responses that we got last year. So we're at 161 right now. So I'm really hoping that you tell your friends, tell your neighbors, because I really do use what I read in that survey to define what we're going to spend our time doing, especially as it relates to being a great place to work. Some of the comments in the survey last year are what led us to pilot Clear here. So if you don't like Clear, just know that if you don't fill out the survey, you may not necessarily get to have your voice heard. The second sort of leg of the stool is the mobility plan. So if you want more information about the mobility plan, LA2B is the website. Has a ton of information about how it relates to our everyday work. And the third is the Sustainable City Plan. Sustainable City Plan is something that is an executive directive that the mayor signed in April. And what these three things have in common is that they all mention Vision Zero. They all have Vision Zero included as a fundamental policy direction. So from the department's perspective, from the mayor's perspective, from the city council's perspective, Vision Zero is something that we as a city are taking on, and DOT is in a leadership position on it. So that's a little bit of information about kind of the background. This is kind of a breakdown of what I shared with the mayor in my performance review. So I get a performance review too. And this year, the question from the mayor's office was, what is LADOT going to do in the next year to deliver on the city's priorities? And so this is what I shared. A lot of it is not a surprise. It comes straight out of our strategic plan. But in terms of what we're going to talk about today, just draw your attention to the first bucket, which is about Vision Zero and great streets. So, it's important. I'm sharing this with you so that you see what the mayor is asking the department to deliver, which is a good indication of what the mayor is likely to include in his budget to the city council, which is directly relevant to us. So I won't read all of these, and I'll make this PowerPoint available to everybody. I won't go through each of these, but this is just to give you a sense. And across the bottom, you see the word equity. Equity has been a huge sort of talking point and discussion point for the mayor and the city council. as we make investments in the city, we need to be very mindful about the role of transportation in both saving people's lives and also getting people access to ladders of opportunity, to jobs and employment. So as much as we are in the safety business and the infrastructure delivery business, we are also in the business of managing people's mobility. The number of choices that people have to get around town is beginning to explode. We are just on the very beginning of a huge disruption in transportation. And you can see in our response to the arrival of companies like Uber and Lyft, the government has struggles when we try and catch up to technology. And we are better when we are leading the policy discussion. So as bike share comes to the city, as car share expands in the city, there's even a scooter share, which I will not comment on, and also an expansion of on-demand, sort of, let's call it private/public transit. Department of Transportation has a role in managing these, making sure they come in safely, and making sure everybody has equal access to them. And they are not exclusively available to people with money and privilege and opportunity already, because they are significantly expand access to good things for people. So Vision Zero was the 10th executive directive, passed at the end of August, and the bottom line goal is to get to zero traffic deaths in 10 years by 2025. Is it a stretch goal? Yes. Does it seem really impossible that we might get there? Maybe. But that does not mean that it is not something we should all strive for. We have some interim goals. We want to reduce the number of traffic deaths by 20% by 2017 because we want to get off this list. So you can't, oh, sorry, you can't really see it. IT gone, here gone. Let me see if that's better. There you go. So collision death rate per 100,000 people, Los Angeles is at the top of the list, unfortunately. And we want to get off that list, or we at least want to get way, way down on that list. Because, as you can see, it's much higher than our peer cities in other parts of the country. So there are things that we could be doing differently to make that work a little bit better. So where are we going to begin? So we took a look at what's happening and who's involved in the severe and fatal crashes on our streets. Each year, a little over 200 people die just trying to get around town. And when you look at the collisions by mode, there's about 14% of them that are the most vulnerable users on the street. People biking, people walking. In particular, children and older adults, right? Because it's physics. Those folks are not as resilient, and they are much less likely to be able to walk away or survive a crash with a motor vehicle. Of the people who die in those crashes, people walking and biking represent almost half. So when we think about where we can make the biggest positive impact, it's really focusing on these crashes of the most vulnerable users, people walking and people biking. So if we can bring those numbers down and focus on solutions to those kinds of crashes, we will be able to get a lot closer to our goal. This is primary trips by mode. So you see that people walking represent about 18% of all of the trips, but they represent about 33% of the people killed or severely injured. So again, there's just that when we start to think practically about where we should focus, these are some of the numbers that guide our work. These are some sort of facts about what happens in Los Angeles. We have almost 100 crashes per day, almost 30,000 per year. 30% of people killed or severely injured while walking or biking are youth, are children, or older adults. Of the people killed while walking, older adults represent almost half. So we're not talking necessarily about people running out in the middle of the street, people behaving poorly. That exists. But we're also talking about older adults just walking across the street in a crosswalk and dying after being injured in a hit and run. Right? So the premise of Vision Zero is that people are going to make mistakes. While people are driving, they're going to be distracted. Right? They're going to be coming from visiting a family member in a hospital, and they're going to have two kids in their back seat, and they're going to be trying to think about what they're going to put on the table for dinner, and their brain, that's all their brain can handle. And they're going to be distracted. People walking and biking are going to be looking at their smartphones when they cross the street. People are going to make mistakes. We can't eliminate those. But the system should be designed to forgive, so that when those mistakes occur, they are not fatal. And that is where engineering and enforcement and education becomes so, so important. So this is about all of the work that we do across the whole department, and it involves all of us. So we thought about who was involved. We also thought about where they were happening, these crashes. And when we look at I know this is a number that is somewhat disputed, but I'm going to use 7,500. 7,500 miles of streets in Los Angeles, about 460 of those represent the lion's share of severe and fatal crashes for people biking and walking. 6% of our city streets represent 65% of the severe and fatal crashes. So that helps because it makes the problem feel more manageable. It guides our focus. When we are working on projects, or when we get requests, or when we get constituent calls, or when we're looking at the Bureau of Street Services resurfacing list, and we're on the high injury network, we have a greater obligation to treat safety instead of capacity and mobility as our #1 concern. And that, I will say, is a significant, I would say, philosophical and policy shift. Right? So for a really long time, we've cared about safety, of course. This department has taken a really proactive approach to safety. But we've also balanced that with the capacity of the streets, right? Trying to move as many vehicles as efficiently as possible through a given point. Usually I say fast, again. As efficiently as possible through a given point at a given time. So we're trying to balance those two things. Vision Zero and the High Injury Network say that safety trumps, right? So even if we know we may get an increase in complaints, or we may see an increase in congestion during off-peak hours, if it results in a safer street, that's what the policy direction is from sort of here forward, right? We're still going to be trying to balance a lot of different things on the streets. What we do, right? It's why we have the smartest, most creative staff. But we are really focused on safety, particularly when we're on these 460 miles. The map on the right, that blue, is from the Community Health Atlas. So that is a map of the neighborhoods in Los Angeles that are communities of concern. They have higher incidence of asthma. They have higher incidence of childhood diabetes. They have higher incidence of people living below the poverty line. They have higher concentrations first-generation immigrants, right? So you can see that there is almost total overlap between those dark blue neighborhoods and the high injury network. So there are inherent inequities in where people are being injured and killed on our network right now. And Vision Zero calls on us not just to divide by 15. I don't have to tell you why we divide by 15. But really to focus where the issues are the most severe. And there is a connection between the equity concerns that we have, the concerns about making the city more affordable for everyone, and safety. There's a study that came out earlier this year from the city of Portland that people of color wait longer for a gap in traffic when they are waiting to cross the street than white people, right? So there are issues around bias and around safety that are connected. And Vision Zero calls on us to start thinking about things that maybe we don't necessarily take into consideration as in our normal work. The strategies are sort of comprehensive, right? I can't overstate our role and the role of the Bureau of Public Works in getting to zero. It is critically important. Engineering is a really, really important pillar. But education and enforcement and evaluation all play a role as well. When you look up the information about what to do for pedestrian and bike crashes, there is, this much literature. If you look it up for sort of vehicle-to-vehicle crashes, there's this much literature. there's a lot we don't know that we're learning, and we have a huge opportunity to lead and to help guide the way these things get implemented across the country. So the executive directive has near-term and long-term actions. This is all available online. I'm not going to try and read it out for you, but it's just to say that, when you look at who's involved in each of them, DOT is just one player. Just like everything in our strategic plan, we need to partner with our other city agencies and other folks in order to achieve this goal. But we play a lead role or a significant partner role in almost every single one of them. So this is something that applies to, these are report backs and actions that touch almost every part of the agency. And even if you don't see your team or your group reflected here, I would say that, any and all ideas are welcome for how we can all play a role in getting to this goal. So who's going to be involved? Executive Steering Committee is co-chaired by us and LAPD, which is a fun partnership. We're learning and growing together. And Mayor's Office and County Department of Public Health, which is actually funded 2 positions to work on Vision Zero that sit at LADOT. Right? So Vision Zero also opens up funding sources and partnerships that we may not have been able to take advantage of in the past. For other folks to come and help us carry the load. Then there is a big task force, which includes city staff from almost every department. Department on Aging actually sent the most people to the last task force meeting, which I found very interesting. Again, that's a partner we don't normally work with on a regular basis. And so what we are going to be able to learn from each other and resources we're going to be able to share is good for the whole city. And then local communities and the Vision Zero Alliance. So who's the Vision Zero Alliance? This is who they are. This is the advocacy coalition that is working on Vision Zero with us. The thing that's interesting to me about this list, if you look at it, Trust South LA, Pals for Health, LA Walks, Advancement Project, Community Health Councils, LA Bike Coalition, that one is AARP, Asian Pacific Islander Obesity Prevention Alliance. Valerie, what's that logo? I think it's MCM, maybe? Most of them do not have the word walk or bike in their name, right? They are advocacy organizations that are advocating around a whole huge host of other things, whether it is social justice, the concerns of sort of older adults, obesity prevention, etc. But they all have transportation as key in their platform. And this is something that's unique and very special about Los Angeles, is that the advocacy community here is so varied and comes from so many different windows and doors into transportation. So again, it gives us access to knowledge, expertise, community connections that we may not normally be able to take advantage of. Other partners are unexpected. For example, we have a partnership with Waze, love them or hate them. 1 in 4 drivers in LA County has this app up, right? So when you think about, should we build a new app and try and get it out there, or should we take advantage of something everybody is already using? We're trying this out to see if it makes a difference. So we gave them a list of, how many? 10 intersections that showed up as among the least safe for people walking. And if you have the app open, I don't think it is not meant to be another distraction. It doesn't make a noise, but this information shows up. And actually, when I was on Waze the other night, the nice lady told me that there was a crash up ahead on the app. So there is a connection there that we're just starting to play around with to see if we can take advantage of the partnership that we have with Waze. So let's talk about engineering a little bit. Vehicle speed is the #1 predictor of the severity of pedestrian crashes, and this is why. And some of it is obvious. If you're hit by a vehicle traveling at 40 miles an hour, you are very unlikely to walk away from that crash. Because of the speed of the vehicle. But part of it is also not as obvious, is that your cone of vision as a driver literally shrinks the faster you go. So the faster a driver is going, they literally cannot see you if you are getting ready to step into their cone of vision. So speed is something that we we are thinking a lot about. And in Los Angeles, I have to tell you, it's not a popular place to tell people they need to slow down. And because people's experience of traffic is that they are normally sitting still, right? Or they're going really, really slowly during the peak periods. But a lot of crashes are happening, on Wednesday night at 3 in the morning, right? They happen during the off-peak times when we have wide streets that carry a lot of traffic when it's congested, but allow drivers to go really fast when it isn't. So what are some of the tools at our disposal that we can manage things differently? ATSAC is one for us to think about, partnering with our sort of enforcement friends, giving drivers information, and something I'll get to a bit later. So this is an example of something that our fantastic design and signal crews and paint sign crews put in at Cesar Chavez in Chicago. And when I look at these two pictures, the thing that I think about is just how much street design sends messages about who has permission and who is a trespasser on a street. So when you look at the left, you are literally not allowed to be there as a person walking, but we know that people are crossing here and that they're getting hit and injured and killed when they cross this street. So if with just some paint and some signal changes, we're changing the message to drivers about who should be sort of the most important user on the street and who they should really watch out for and take care of. This is a little further down the street. We used paint and bollards to shrink the crossing distance. And when we were out there and we were talking to some of the business owners, they said, well, this is all nice, whatever, but really it's that crossing down by the El Pollo Loco where people are getting really, really hurt. So that local knowledge and expertise of the street and how people use it is irreplaceable, right? And I think that we have a huge wealth of knowledge in our traffic officers, in our district offices, and in our partners at LAPD, and in the communities that are on these streets. So we put in this overhead rectangular rapid flashing beacon at the same time based on that input. Here's Reseda. This is another project where with just some paint and bollards, we've changed who has permission and who is a trespasser on the street. And this is really important. Drivers, there's a couple of massive research projects from LA and the Bay Area about what drivers want from the street. And what drivers want are an organized street, and they actually really prefer these kinds of protected bike lanes because they show you very clearly where to expect the bicyclists. And the thing that is the most sort of unsettling for drivers is unpredictability. So drivers need predictability. Bicyclists want legitimacy, right? They want a space on the street. So these kinds of designs are meant to do that and help communicate and improve safety. So here's Broadway before and after. And what's interesting about Broadway is that even though we didn't put a dedicated bike piece of infrastructure here, we've seen an increase in the number of people biking on the street because we brought the speed down of the street itself. So sometimes you don't have to provide separated bike infrastructure, but if you can just slow down and manage the speed, everybody benefits. So this is something that we all have to keep in mind, right? Is that we are at the very beginning of a huge change in vehicle technology. And even though right now your car may be able to sort of beep at you when you're parallel parking, at some point, this is going to be on the market. And there's really two versions of what this future looks like. There's this one where you and your very good-looking Swedish friends will drive down the road and watch a video, and I don't know what this chick is doing, maybe playing like backgammon or something. And I'm assuming that these things have toilets in them because, the idea is, well, you don't care about traffic anymore because you're just going to kick it in your driverless vehicle, which is going to be very expensive and very high end. And then there's this version of the future, right, where you have Google, which doesn't really have any skin in the game, companies like Apple, producing vehicles that are really meant to solve urban mobility, congestion, and safety problems, right? And if you are in a car that will literally not allow you to be the cause of a crash, we have the potential to move a lot closer to Vision Zero. The question here for us, for all of us to keep in mind is, the auto manufacturers, if you talk to them, will say things like this. Well, we're going to provide these vehicles and we're going to make infrastructure obsolete because we can't rely on local governments to deliver infrastructure, so we just won't need it anymore because the cars are all going to talk to each other, right? These cars cannot tell the difference between a dog and a paper bag currently, right? And I don't know that they're ever going to get there. From my perspective, there will always be a role for infrastructure. And the infrastructure will take on more importance if it is managing the fleet. Because if you think about, like, Lexus has a software, and Volvo has theirs, and Audi has theirs, and Google has theirs, and Apple has theirs, how are they going to talk to each other? And if, some percentage of the fleet is still a bunch of 95 Camrys, and these vehicles are just solving for the worst drivers on the road who are not using driverless vehicles, infrastructure becomes more important. And so I would just sort of plant that seed. I was at the Automated Vehicle Symposium in Michigan this summer. We're going to have a presentation about some of the things that I saw, which will be both exciting and also terrifying. But, they have the potential, if we can partner with them, to get us closer to Vision Zero. So when we think about what's coming and we think about what we do and our role in transportation, there's a huge opportunity, there's also huge risk, right? And before these things arrive, it will be easier to talk about unpopular topics, right? Like pricing, like our role as a management and regulatory agency. It'll be easier to talk about those things before everybody owns one of these. So all of that stuff is really only good for us if we can get more of this, right? Because this is from Ciclavia in South LA. Driverless vehicles and the future of transportation. We want more space for people to be able to use their streets as public space. And for streets to be flexible, and for streets to be safe, and for streets to be beautiful. Because we want these kinds of things to be happening more often. These kinds of things make our neighborhood stronger, which makes our city stronger. And that's really the role of transportation, and hopefully the outcome of Vision Zero. So this is a little bit of information. We have a website up. It has a big bunch of sort of information about the methodology we used to get the high injury network, about some of the facts and figures that I shared. We also have a Twitter account. And then if you haven't checked it out already, our annual report also highlights a lot of the things that many of you have been working on over the last year already around Vision Zero. So with that, I'm just going to say, it took a really long time to get to the starting line for Vision Zero. And now that we're here, I want to make sure that everybody feels like they can contribute and can work on this together. And it's hopefully an opportunity to also bring a lot of our other city partners and our community partners to work with us in ways that we haven't before.